Part 74. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 733. Li Jinghua also sent someone to pick up Li Jian and the others, so the two families separated as soon as they entered the city. Li Jian wanted to salute Qi Heiran, because he was worried that the other party was the second uncle of the emperor's wife. Qi Heiran dismounted and talked with him, then got on his horse, and said to Mu Yangling after returning, "Li Jian is too cunning, sister-in-law invited him here, just don't set yourself on fire." Mu Yangling didn't care and said, "My sister-in-law is smart. Since she dares to invite her, she is sure of it. Besides, this matter is good for the elder brother. The elder sister-in-law is already a queen, so why worry about the Li family?" Qi Heiran smiled, and didn't say any more. The sister-in-law's eldest brother has a disabled leg, and her mother's family has nothing to rely on. As long as Li Jian grasps this point, he can make the sister-in-law have a lot of scruples. How can he have no scruples? However, Qi Heiran didn't explain any more, so it's better not to let Aling worry about such unknown things. Mu Yangling arranged for her natal family to settle down. In the evening, everyone had a lively reunion dinner. Fan Zijian and Xiao Xia were also invited over. Xu Wanyang took Xiao Xia's hand and looked at it carefully, and whispered to her some things that need special attention during pregnancy, and some precautions after giving birth, and taught her everything in detail, which moved Xiao Xia very much. Although Nanny Xia and Mu Yangling also taught her a lot, one of them is a servant, and some things are naturally difficult to say, while Mu Yangling only gave birth once, and many things were not even noticed by herself, so it is naturally impossible taught her. And Xu Wanyang regretted that she was not around when her daughter was confinement, and when she met Xiao Xia with a big belly, and Fan Zijian was considered to be her watcher growing up, she naturally taught Xiao Xia as a junior. Xu Wanyang talked to Xiao Xia in a low voice, and then took Fan Zijian's hand and sighed, "I haven't seen you for 5 years, why have you lost a lot of weight?" When Fan Zijian left back then, he was somewhere between a teenager and a young man. His body was still healthy, and he was as elegant as a good son. Back then, Xu Wanyang secretly thought about him and Aling, but now he has grown into a young man. It is said that his body should be stronger, that's right, but it happened to be even thinner. Xu Wanyang could feel that there was not much flesh in his hand when she held his hand, it was all bones. Looking at Qi Heiran again, although the puffy baby fat on the son-in-law's face is gone, but the strong body is fine at first glance. Xu Wanyang looked at Fan Zijian with sadness in her eyes. Fan Zijian was also obedient, and joked, "It's not that auntie doesn't know, Heiran eats a lot, how can I beat him to eat at the same table with him? Plus Aling is also partial, so I lost weight like this." Xiao Xia looked at Fan Zijian in surprise. This was the first time she had seen her husband and elders acting like a baby. She quickly raised her eyes to look at Xu Wanyang, and saw her smiling like a flower and patted Fan Zijian, "You are too naughty, but since you said that, with me watching tonight, you can eat as much as you want, and I won't allow him to steal from you." Fan Zijian said hastily, "But the dishes made by those cooks are not quite to my taste. My nephew always misses those dishes made by my aunt, and I can drool in my dreams." As he spoke, he really sucked his saliva twice. Xiao Xia was even more astonished. She glanced at Xu Wanyang with flickering eyes, and lowered her head to meditate. Madame Xia was happy to see her. Madame finally paid attention to things around her and started to think. It seems that she listened to everything she taught her. Hard. When Xu Wanyang heard this, she immediately got up and said, "Where is the kitchen? I'll cook 2 dishes for you." Qi Heiran glared at Fan Zijian, and hurriedly held down his mother-in-law, expressing that she was exhausted. How could she be asked to cook? But Xu Wanyang said with a smile, "I just stayed in the carriage, and I didn't rush along the way. I stopped and went, where did I get tired? It's been a long time since you guys have eaten my cooking. I'm in a hurry today, so I'll give it to you first. Make 2 dishes, tomorrow I will cook properly next time. Qi Heiran failed to stop Xu Huanyang, and Mu Yangling happily followed his mother to the kitchen. The ingredients in the kitchen are already made, and Xu Huanyang can cook directly. Mu Yangling wanted his mother to cook his favorite dish of lion's head with crab powder, but Xu Huanyang remembered Fan Zijian's 2 dishes, one of squirrel mandarin fish and one of fire party with honey sauce. He also comforted his daughter in a low voice, "I will make it for you tomorrow. The lion's head is delicious only if you make it yourself. What you have now doesn't taste like mine." When Qi Heiran saw these 2 dishes, he was instantly jealous. Even if the lion's head can't make it in a hurry, the braised pork that the mother-in-law and son-in-law love to eat has enough ingredients, which is much easier to make than squirrel mandarin fish and honey sauce. Fan Zijian was really happy, and followed Xu Huanyang attentively to serve her. She directly took Qi Heiran's place at dinner, and served Xu Huanyang several times with serving chopsticks. Qi Heiran and the others had no choice but to change their seats. If a guest came to see the seat, they would definitely think that Fan Zijian and Xiao Xia were Xu Huanyang's daughter and son-in-law. Seeing this, Bowen couldn't help but pursed his lips and smiled, and glanced at his sister and brother-in-law, but Bosi and Kijia were circling around the little bear unaware. The 2 sat in the middle with the little bear on one left and the other on the right. Mu Yangling wanted to bring the little bear to the side for easy feeding, but Kijia blocked her, patted her chest and said, "Don't worry, sister, we will take good care of our nephew." Little Bear also hugged Bosi's waist and said, "I want my uncle and aunt." As expected, he liked the new and disliked the old. Mu Yangling gave his son a sad look. Seeing him obediently sitting between the 2 older children eating food at the table, he immediately felt relieved. Kijia and Bosi were very interested in feeding their nephews. They were the youngest at home and were often taken care of by others. Now it is so easy to see a nephew younger than themselves who needs to be taken care of, and they are immediately overjoyed. The 2 of them fed the little nephew patiently like never before. As long as there is rice and vegetables in the bowl, Xiao Xiang can eat by himself, without adults worrying about it, and the rice grains will not fall out, which is very worry-free. Under the surprised gazes of the 2, the servant added another bowl of rice to the little bear. Kajia lowered her head to look at the little bear's belly in surprise, and secretly winked at the twin brother. Bosi saw it and nodded secretly. After the 2 children finished eating, they wanted to play by themselves on the grounds that they would not disturb the adults' reminiscences, and they brought the bear with them by the way. Mu Yangling felt that this was at his own home, so he waved his hand and let them go, and Guyu quickly followed up to serve. Not long after, there was an exclamation from outside the door. Xu Huanyang looked outside and asked, "Did your brother and sister get into trouble?" Mu Yangling patted her hand and said, "The younger brothers and sisters just came, what trouble can they cause? Most of the servants made a fuss when they encountered something. I'll just go and have a look. You sit down first. Just give Qi Heiran a wink and ask him to treat Shushi well." Bowen nodded to his brother-in-law, and hurriedly followed out. His family knew about his family affairs. When the younger siblings didn't calm down, it doesn't matter if they get into trouble, don't bring your nephew down, that's good. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 734. Guyu was standing at the door anxiously, and persuaded in a low voice, "Second young master, second miss, please bring our young master out quickly." "What's wrong?" Seeing Mu Yangling coming, Guyu breathed a sigh of relief, and hurriedly gave her the position at the door, stood aside with her head bowed, and whispered a brief story in Mu Yangling's ear. Kajia and Bosi took Xiao Xiang and ran straight into Xu Huanyang's room, but Kajia urged Xiao Xiang to unlatch a box. When Guyu saw this, he hurriedly stopped him, and the key to open the box was just a key, so why bother breaking a box and a lock? But Bosi pushed the person out directly, and Xiao Xiang had torn the big lock quickly with his eyes and hands. He opened it and moved it away. There were 3 small boxes in a row, and the bottom was covered with cotton wool. A piece of silk and satin, and below that there are more than a dozen bolts of high-quality fabric neatly placed. Before Guyu could be surprised, little Xiang has already pried open 3 small boxes, revealing pearls, gems, and beautiful jade inside. The smallest pearl is the size of a pinky finger, and the gemstone on top is the size of a thumb. After a quick glance, I feel that it is dazzling, and the beautiful jade is not ordinary. The young master pried such a precious box, and he still came to visit my grandfather's family. I don't know how to say that the young master is uneducated. Although she was teased by the second girl and the second son, Guyu's face turned pale, but the maidservant who caught up was dazzled by those jewels, and she screamed out loudly, so she couldn't stop her, so she had to stop her and take her with her. Kjiabosi, who was watching the little bear running around, asked someone to notify Mu Yangling, and also ordered someone to guard the courtyard, and no one was allowed to go out without permission. Seeing the mess in the house, Mu Yangling's face darkened, but Kijia ran forward without realizing it, and complained, "Sister, this girl stopped us from going out." She didn't think there was anything wrong with prying her own box. Mu Yangling looked at her deeply, until he saw her lower her head to avoid her eyes, then turned her eyes to Bosi who was standing beside her. Bosi also had a serious face, and quickly admitted his mistake, "Sister, we were wrong." Mu Yangling snorted coldly, then turned to ask the following blog post, "Have the two of them always been like this?" Bowen was ashamed, "It's because my younger brother is not good enough to discipline me, so I asked my elder sister to help me." He raised his head and gave the twins a look, and said, "I told you to be obedient earlier, and you all ignored it, and you will cause trouble just after entering Beijing." Kajia pouted and said, "Where did we get into trouble? The things in this box were all given to my sister by my father and mother. What's wrong with asking my nephew to open it?" Mu Yangling asked, "Have you passed the owner's consent?" Kajia choked, and Mu Yangling stared into her eyes and asked, "Does mother know? Or did you ask me?" Kajia stared blankly at her sister's eyes, shrinking her neck in fear. Mu Yangling waved to Guyu who was behind him and said, "Pack up your things and tell the servants in the yard to keep their mouths shut. If I want my concubine to know who dares to pass on the words that should not be passed on, I will directly ask Ren Yazi's family to sell it. Go, there is no need for another trial, and I don't want to listen to their reasons." Guyu shivered, and responded in a low voice. Mu Yangling stepped forward to hold the little bear's hand and left without looking back, "Follow me." Kijia and Bosi looked at each other, feeling a little apprehensive, but also slightly excited. When my father came home and saw them, he often sighed that it would have been better if my sister was at home. When my elder brother taught them, he would sometimes blame himself with red eyes. If my sister was here, they would definitely not be like this. I always heard how powerful my sister is, but they were only 5 years old when my sister left. My impression of my sister is that she loves them very much and always gives them delicious food. My sister is very beautiful, but how powerful is my sister? I really don't know. Mu Yangling took them to the flower hall, and she sat down on the main seat, ignoring the dragon and phoenix twins standing below. Seeing that the eldest brother was standing obediently on the side, the two had no choice but to stand below with their hands down. But Mu Yangling pulled Xiao Xiang to stand in front of him, and said softly, "Little Xiang, do you still remember the agreement you made with Daddy last night?" Little bear tilted his head to look at his mother. Mu Yangling touched his head and said with a smile, "Didn't the little bear say that he is an adult, so he has to be reasonable like an adult, right?" Little bear clapped his hands happily, "I'm an adult now." Mu Yangling nodded and said, "You are an adult, so today my mother will teach you a truth that adults understand. It is very simple, that is, how to distinguish between good and evil. Child, you must know that there are many things in life that you should not do what you should do, and you have to distinguish between good and bad, and then judge whether it should be done, not what others tell you to do, and you do it? Kajia and Bosi turned pale. Little Xiang looked at his mother in confusion. Mu Yangling said this to Little Xiang, not to Little Xiang, but she still gave an easy-to-understand example. She pointed to Kajia and Bosi behind him and said, "You little uncle and aunt took a piece of pastry for you to give to the hungry egg. This is a good thing, do you want to do it?" Little Bear nodded fiercely, "Danner will cry when she's hungry." Mu Yangling asked again, "Then if your little uncle and aunt instruct you to grab Brother Xiaobeo's cakes and feed them to hungry eggs, will you go?" Little Xiang wrinkled his nose, "He and Brother Xiaobeo are the best, how can they go and grab his things?" Mu Yangling knew what he was thinking at a glance, and said, "This is a bad thing, of course you can't do it, not only you can't snatch Brother Xiaobeo's pastries, you can't snatch other people's pastries, right?" Little Bear asked, "What about the egg? He's hungry." Mu Yangling said with a smile, "You can ask Brother Xiaobeo if he would like to give the pastry to Danner, or you can go to the kitchen and ask the servants for something to eat. There are many ways to accomplish something. As long as you think about it, you can always come up with the method, but you can't achieve it in an incorrect and abnormal way. Little Bear, since you have grown up, you should understand these principles." Kajia and Bosi's complexions turned even paler. Mu Yangling looked at them straight, and said, "The box is your grandmother's box, why did you pry it open?" The little bear lowered his head in shame, and said in a low voice, "I know, the box belongs to my grandmother, so I have to ask my grandmother before opening it." He wrinkled his nose sadly, and said, "Then I am pregnant, and my grandmother will still accept it like me." Mu Yangling touched his head and said, "If you know your mistakes, you will be a good boy. Let your uncle accompany you to apologize to your grandmother, okay?" Little Xiang nodded repeatedly, stepped forward to pull Kajia and Bosi, and said, "Little uncle, little aunt, let's go and apologize to grandma." Kajia and Bosi were pale and wanted to follow the little bear away, but under Mu Yangling's watchful eyes, they didn't dare to move an inch. Mu Yangling looked at them coldly, then looked away, and smiled at Little Bear, "Mother still has something to say to your little uncle and aunt. Little Bear will go with Big Uncle first, and we will be back in a while." Little Xiang never struggled with one thing for too long. Upon hearing this, he took Bowen's hand and ran out in a hurry. He was going to apologize to his grandmother. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 735. Suddenly there were only 3 people left in the room. Mu Yangling sat at the top and looked at the twins standing below. Seeing that their faces were getting paler, he put down the teacup in his hand and said, "Father will not arrive in the capital in half a month, and mother brought him. I wrote a letter to you, saying that you were raised by me during these days in Beijing, but I never felt that I had anything to teach you. As my mother said, the children of the Mu family are very obedient, so I won't say anything. Your eldest brother knew how to hold his father's calf when he was 3 years old and said he didn't want to eat fine rice. He stays at home, and when he grows up, he takes good care of himself, never worries adults, and helps his mother cook. As for the principles of life, neither I nor my father taught him much. Virtuousness, we only need to look to know what we should do and what we should not do. I think anyone who can think can understand this truth." Mu Yangling looked at them with some disappointment and said, "You have been able to read since childhood, but you don't like reading anymore. You should have read the most basic Analects of Confucius, right? There is an aunt in the family, and the mother sets an example. Don't tell me you are at this age, but even the most basic loyalty and rape are not good or bad." Kajia and Bosi's faces became paler, but they pursed their lips tightly, showing some dissatisfaction on their faces. Mu Yangling sighed slightly, feeling that his younger siblings were spoiled. Mu Yangling looked at the sky outside in a daze, and asked, "Do you know how to hunt, farm, wash and cook?" The two children were stunned. Since they were sensible, their family conditions have always been very good. Not to mention hunting and farming, they have not seen many times even washing and cooking. Mu Yangling smiled wryly, and asked, "Do you know how hard the Mu family lived before?" The two children don't know that except for the aunt. No one likes to read about the past, but the aunt also reads to Ziyuheng and cousin Ziyulan, mostly saying how hard their life was before and how good they are now, tell them to repay the Mu family with gratitude. They were curious to listen to it at first, but when they saw those words from their aunt back and forth, they didn't want to listen to it again after hearing it twice. The two children grew up in a very good environment. Except for the first 2 years of suffering, they hardly suffered any crimes afterwards. In the first 2 years, they were still young and could not remember anything at all. When they were sensible, Mu Shi was already a general in Xingzhou Mansion, and the family had no shortage of food and clothing, so there was no need for the two children to worry about anything. Later, Mu Yangling even married Qi Heiran directly. Qi Ziyuan is the largest among the 3 prefectures of Xingzhou in Jingzhou Hanzhong. Even if everyone doesn't look at Mu Shi's face, they will treat the members of Mu's family more courteously for Qi Ziyuan's face. Willing to praise and flatter, in the past 2 years, Mu Shi has directly become the second-rank general of Xieying, let alone the Mu family in the Northland. Although the Mu family is still small, there are only a few servants, and Xu Wanyang can cook by herself, so there is really no need for the two children to do anything, as long as they go to school well and don't cause trouble. Mu Shi was so busy that when he went back every day, the two children had already fallen asleep. When he went out, the two children were still awake, so he neglected their education. In front of their mother, they behaved like obedient babies. Apart from not being as fond of reading as their elder sister and elder brother, Aunt Chu and Xu Wanyang really couldn't find any other shortcomings. And Bowen knew it, but it was too late. He has to go to school, manage the nursery, eat and live almost all outside, and only take a day or two to go back during the 10-day break every month. When he finds that his younger siblings are wrong and wants to correct them, he has nothing to do with them. They don't listen to reason and beat them, but they don't remember to eat and beat them. During the beating, they cried earth-shatteringly and were extremely miserable. After the pain, they still went their own way. He wanted to let his sister discipline him 1 or 2 times. The children in the village used to be very skinny, but they became obedient after being treated by their sister a few times. Moreover, in Mu Bowen's heart, his sister is omnipotent. The almighty Mu Yangling was looking at her 2 younger siblings with tightly pursed lips. She was extremely disappointed. She never felt that arrogance and unreasonableness could be justified in a comfortable and happy life. Xiaobao has always been protected in an ivory tower, but he is so young. Have your own right and wrong judgments, know what you can do and what you can't touch. Kijia and Bosi are already 10 years old, not too young. Their parents know that Mu Shi is tough but tender to his family, but he has a bottom line and morality. Not to mention Xu Wanyang, even if she is abandoned and framed by her family, a kind-hearted, their hearts have never changed. They are soft on the outside and strong on the inside, and their principles are stronger than Mu Shi's. Even if their parents never taught them verbally, but their deeds are there, they can learn how to behave. Why are the 2 children still can it grow crooked? But she can't blame the 2 children, because they are still children. Mu Yangling didn't say how hard they had been in the past, but just asked, "Do you think it's wrong for you to tell the little bear to pry the box?" Kajia pouted and said, "Sister, that's my mother's box. It belongs to our family, not someone else's. If it's someone else's, I know I can't pry it. Does everything in our house belong to your brothers and sisters?" Kijia and Bosi choked. Mu Yangling continued, It doesn't matter whether you can pry mother's box or not, but when it comes to prying the box itself, do you think you are right? Do you know that the box can only be repaired or discarded after it is broken? Yes, how much is that box and that lock worth? Kajia and Bosi looked at Mu Yangling in astonishment. Mu Yangling smiled slightly, and said, that box is a camphorwood box, it's not expensive, and you can buy it for 3 or 4 taels of silver. Although the lock is a good one, it's big enough, but it's just a lock. You can buy one for 1 tael of silver, but do you know how valuable 5 taels of silver are? Mu Yangling's eyes were slightly red because of his anger, and he said, I need to hunt more than 500 rabbits a day in the mountains, and I need to catch a live wild boar no less than 200 catties by luck. 5 taels of silver was the expenses of our Mu family in the past 2 months, including the fine rice that your mother and elder brother ate, and the money for the medicine. Back then, because of the lack of 5 taels of silver to pay taxes, when my father asked Lijhan for forgiveness day, but today, for something worth 5 taels of silver, you just pry it if you say it. You can ask your mother for the key. Why do you want to pry the box, nephew? Kijia and Bosi knelt on the ground with a plop, bowed their heads and remained silent. Mu Yangling couldn't help but patted the table and asked angrily, say, why did you order your nephew to go? Kijia said with red eyes, we just want to test whether the bear's strength is great. The two of them often heard from relatives that my sister was very strong. When I was 8 or 9 years old, I could carry a wild boar weighing more than 200 kilograms. My parents and elder brother didn't deny it. They also asked them to eat more, saying that they could gain strength by eating more. My sister they used to be able to eat very well, but at dinner, Xiaoxiang was only a 3-year-old baby, but he ate more than the two of them. They inevitably became curious and wanted to test it out. Mu Yang was so angry that he said, there is a way to test Xiaoxiang's strength. When you go out and turn left, you will find the martial arts hall. Didn't Xiaoxiang take you there to hang out in the afternoon? It's okay not to choose, but to choose such a method. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 736. Kijia and Bosi knelt on the ground with red eyes and did not move. Mu Yangling looked at them gloomily for a while, and said, go back and kneel in front of your mother. As for Little Bear, even if he is your nephew, if you are wrong, yes, I will apologize to him when I see him tomorrow, and when my father comes to the capital, I will have a good talk with him about your education. Kijia and Bosi didn't dare to say anything even though they were a little unconvinced. And Shu Wanyang knew what the two children did, so she reached out and hit them for the first time in anger, and said with red eyes, how did you become like this? How did you become like this? It's my fault, it's all my fault. Shu Wanyang was in poor health, her chest felt tight when she was excited. Kajia and Bosi saw their mother's complexion was not good, they rushed to support her, and cried, Mother, don't be angry, we made a mistake, we will never dare to do this again in the future, do not be angry. Shu Wanyang pushed their hands away, gritted her teeth and said with red eyes, go out and kneel, get out. The two children knelt outside with red eyes. These movements are not small, Fan Zijian and Xiao Xia just pretended not to know about them, but Qi Heiran said to Mu Yangling, my younger brothers and sisters are still young, you have to teach them what is wrong slowly, why are you so arrogant? Mu Yangling rolled his eyes and said, your eye sees that they are still young. If the little bear dares to do this, will you beat them up or not? Mu Yangling snorted and said, they should be glad that I'm married now, so they shouldn't meddle too much in their natal family's affairs, or I'll have to throw them into a corner of the mountain to reform. Her son can be a dude in the future, but he can't distinguish right from wrong, good from evil. At this time, Shu Wanyang was lying on the bed with her eyes open looking at the curtain above her head. She seldom paid attention to the child's education, and only now discovered her negligence towards the child. Both Aling and Bowen are very obedient and sensible. Bosi and Kijia were also cute and very sensible when they were young. Before today, she only thought that the two children were a bit delicate and willful, but they were pampered and grew up. She doesn't think this is a big problem, she thinks that they are squeamish, as long as they know what they should know. She never thought that children would not understand right and wrong. How could they not understand? Aling and Bowen knew it without being taught. Xu Huanyang seriously recalled how she was a mother, and then realized that she had failed very much, and she rarely paid attention to the children's problems. Aling follows her husband when she goes in and out, and she has her own husband to teach her. She only needs to teach her cooking skills and some things she should do as a woman, not to mention Bowen. She hardly needs to worry about it. But when it was Bosi and Kijia's turn, Xu Huanyang was heartbroken and couldn't lie down any longer. She put on her clothes and got up to go out. The two children were still kneeling at the door with their teeth gritted. Feeling cold, Xu Huanyang pulled the two children up, dragged them into the house, ordered the servants to make ginger tea for them to drink, and pushed the two children to bed. Both of them were a bit shy, and stood unwilling to move. Since they were 7 years old, they seldom slept together. Xu Huanyang lay in the middle, and said, "Come on, let's talk to my bride." Kijia and Bosi lay beside her, one on the left and the other on the right. Kijia immediately hugged her mother, pouted and said, "Mother, my second brother and I really knew we were wrong, so don't be angry. Then tell me, where did you go wrong? We shouldn't have pried your box without asking you, let alone order the little bear to do these things," Kijia concluded. Bosi also nodded again and again. Although they were arrogant, it wasn't that they couldn't listen to other people's comfort. Although they were not convinced at the beginning of what their sister said, they also knew that what she said was right. But Xu Huanyang sighed, and said, "You guys, I'm afraid you won't be able to understand your eldest sister's anger until now." Xu Huanyang knew that no matter how much she said, it would be useless. The two children would not have experienced that feeling without suffering. She could only tell them the stories of their elder sister and elder brother when they were young, how Mu Yangling went into the mountain to hunt before dawn, how he carried the prey down from the mountain and then sent it to the town to sell it for them. Back to fine rice. Sometimes in the middle of the night and cold winter, Mu Yangling he wanted to follow Mu Shi into the mountains. Bosi and Kijia opened their eyes wide and only listened to these as stories. Xu Huanyang smiled wryly in her heart, but since she had made up her mind, she would not back down anymore. She just explained in more detail how their elder sister used to survive and take care of her family in the mountains and forests and poor rural areas, and how she went to the town to find a butcher to sell her drop prey or how to exchange prey with farmers for food. Kijia and Bosi listened with great interest. Although they felt that what their mother said was too specific and affected the story, they felt relieved when they thought that all these happened to their own sister. Mother rarely mentioned her previous life. Although she was punished this time, but also got a benefit. The good mood of the two lasted until the next morning, when the whole family ate together. Only the two of them had a different meal from the previous meal. They were all coarse grains, but the meat and vegetables were well balanced. The two of them looked at Mu Yangling blankly, and Mu Yangling said, "You were young and not in good health, so my father and I have always raised you well, but we have cultivated you into a character that doesn't know suffering. So, from now on, you will eat the same food that I ate back then. Don't worry, although my food is not as fine as yours, it is much better than ordinary people's." The twins just finished listening to their sister's heroic story last night, and their admiration for her is like a surging river. Coupled with yesterday's shock, the two of them respected and feared her. When they glanced at their mother, they saw her bowing her head after eating porridge. "I didn't dare to beg for mercy. I honestly picked up a steamed bun and stuffed it into my mouth. Although the taste is not as good as fine grains, it is still very good." Twins feel good. But after only one day, the two of them felt that if time could be turned back, they would take back their thoughts from this morning. If the steamed buns with coarse noodles can be tolerated, then the rice cooked with coarse grains is much different from the rice cooked with fine rice. There is a hard feeling in the mouth, only a touch of rice fragrance. They have never eaten such unpalatable rice. The two wanted to beg for mercy, but when they looked up, they saw her sister's eyes that seemed to be smiling but not smiling. Both of them refused to admit defeat, so they swallowed their words immediately, and gritted their teeth. Mu Yangling turned around and told Li Shun, "Proceed step by step. After 2 days, the rice will be lowered, and the noodles will be lowered. After half a month, I want them to eat rice mixed with bran without changing their expressions." Li Chun hesitated for a moment and said in a low voice, "Madam, I saw the second son and the second girl go to the kitchen to serve a plate of dim sum at noon." Mu Yangling smiled slightly, "Don't worry, they won't have such an opportunity." As a result, Bosi and Kijia found that they were so poor that they could not even find anything pawned. All their silver was temporarily confiscated, and even their clothes and accessories were put away and locked in the warehouse. Once you do it, you don't have to wear it. Mu Yangling didn't just block all their back routes, saying, "If you don't have money, you can earn it. Before our family fled to Xinzhou Prefecture, let alone money, we even borrowed food for food. As a result, my father and I earned a fortune in 2 years, and I was only 9 years old at the time, several months younger than you." The two children gritted their teeth and stood firm. They felt that they were born of the same parents. The elder brother is talented and famous, and the elder sister is also so powerful, so they will not be too bad. The reborn wife is farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 737. Mu Yangling polished the twins so that the two of them had no extra time to idle every day. Unknowingly, they had been in the capital for 7 or 8 days, and the two of them hadn't gotten into trouble for the second time so far. Bowen blinked, asked Mu Yangling, "Sister, did you do it on purpose?" Mu Yangling glanced at him, and said, "Elder brother is like a father. Dad doesn't have time, so can't you be more aggressive?" Bowen gave her a flattering smile, and Mu Yangling hummed twice, saying, "Today I'm going to accompany my mother to go shopping in Rongsheng Street. Your brother-in-law is going to enter the palace, so you come to escort the car and guard." Bowen immediately straightened his body and said yes, turned around and strode to arrange the itinerary. Bosi and Kijia, who were playing with Xiaoxiang, looked at each other, rushed forward and hugged Mu Yangling's leg, and shouted, "Sister, we're going shopping too. We also want to appreciate the customs of the capital." Mu Yangling twitched the corner of his mouth, nodded and said, "No problem, let's go." Bosi stepped forward to hug the little bear in a fawning manner, and said with a smile, "Sister, just leave the bear to us. Don't worry, I guarantee that he won't be bumped and bumped. We won't dare to push him to do bad things again." The little bear didn't appreciate it, and shouted at his mother with open arms, "I want to go by myself, I want to go by myself." Bosi could only put him down, and he and Kijia led him on the left and right. Rongsheng Street is one of the most prosperous living and commercial streets in Beijing. Xu Wanyang and Xiao Xia went to the silk and satin shop to look at the fabrics. Mu Yangling saw that the 3 children couldn't stay idle, so he asked his servants to protect them and go out for a stroll. Kijia and Bosi are still children even though they are 10 years old, and they can't move when they see the snacks on the street, but they have no money, and the servants behind them have also been ordered by their sister, and they will not pay them. The two of them glanced at Xiao Xiang, and finally moved their eyes away from those snacks with difficulty. They went back and decided to ask their elder brother what to do in the capital to make money, and if there is anything suitable for the two of them. Kajia finally remembered that her mother said that she used to make money from embroidery, and Sister Xiaolan's current embroidery is hard to come by, so Kajia leaned into Bosi's ear and said, "Second brother, What do you think I sell my embroidery for money? Thinking of his younger sister's embroidery skills, Bo thought for a while, and finally nodded against his conscience. You can try it, but where did you get the fabric and needlework? Kajia said proudly, we will go to the silk and satin shop in a while. Mother will definitely buy fabrics, then I will take advantage of the situation and ask the shopkeeper for some rags, and then I will ask Sister Guyu for some sewing when I go back, and I only need 3 pennies for a bunch of candied Ha's money. Kajia almost drooled. How can I sell a purse for a few hundred cash? Hearing Kijia's words, Bosi felt a little confident, and said, I'll find out the prices of those purses for you and the shopkeeper later. The two discussed it in a low voice, and when they looked at the snacks on the street, they had already imagined how delicious they were when they entered their mouths. They took a deep breath, and resolutely turned their heads and led the little bear back to the silk and satin village. Little Seong was also drooling looking at those snacks, but he was young and had a weak stomach, so the servants would not dare to give him food. They lied to him that they couldn't buy it without money. So the first thing little Seong did when he rushed back to the silk and satin village was to throw himself into his mother's arms, and stretched out his hand to ask her for money. Mother, little Seong is very hungry and wants money. Mu Yangling touched his head and asked with a smile, what do you want money for? Buy something to eat? You don't need to buy it, I'll ask someone to buy it for you, okay? Little bear shook his head, I want to buy it myself. Mu Yangling thought for a while, then beckoned a boy and a woman, and said, take the young master to the Yupin building to buy some Yaikua things. Mu Yangling took out a piece of silver and handed it to him, and said with a smile, Xiao Xiong, remember to buy as much as you eat, don't waste it, and don't hold it too much, you understand. It was the first time for Xiao Xiong to take money with his own hands, so he nodded excitedly. The young servant also understood what the mistress meant, so he went straight up and hugged Xiaoshizi and turned to Yupinlu. Just as Xiao Xiong was about to point to the street and shout to go there, he smelled the fragrance coming from Yupinlu, and he was honest. He just stayed in the boy's arms and didn't move. Little Xiong didn't know how to order menus, he insisted on looking at the actual selection, so the woman went to find the shopkeeper of Yupinlu. Knowing that it was the Prince of Rongjun, the shopkeeper hurriedly came out to greet him. Even though the other party was just a 3-year-old baby, he still had a smile on his face, bowed his waist very respectfully and said, it turns out that the prince is coming here, it is so radiant. Come on, the kitchen is very smoky, so it's not good to let Xiao Shiza go there. Since you want to see the real thing, please go upstairs to the box, and the little one will pass the dishes to you, and when the time comes, whichever dish you like, just leave it come down. Little Xiong blinked, and didn't understand some words, but he understood the last sentence. Remembering that his father taught him to pay attention to royal dignity, he put on a straight face, waved his little hand, pointed upstairs, and said, go. The servant hurriedly carried him up respectfully, and the shopkeeper followed with a smile on his face. He personally pushed open the noble box on the second floor and invited him in. He had greeted the old lady in advance and knew that the princess was next door. The silk and satin village is not far away, and the princess wants to feed the little prince some delicious and easy to digest food. The shopkeeper is also very good. He has long been working in the kitchen to make some children's food. It should be delicate, delicious, and healthy. It can not only please the little prince, but also win the favor of the princess. The shopkeeper served the dishes in person, and explained the origin of these dishes to Xiong in a low-pitched, easy-to-understand language. Xiong was salivating when he smelled the aroma, and the servants hurriedly waited on him for dinner. When he ate a bowl of soft and glutinous dessert, Little Bear's eyes widened and he said, it's delicious, even better than Brother Ziobeo's homemade one. I want another bowl for Brother Ziobeo to eat at night. The old mama was startled, and hurriedly said in a low voice, my lord, the eldest prince is not allowed to eat outside food. Why? Little Bear's eyes widened, Dissatisfied, we ate it when we came out to play last time. The shopkeeper frowned when he heard that, and became more respectful to the little bear. Seeing the anxious face of the old woman, he said in a difficult way, "Don't dare to lie to the young prince. In fact, this dessert was researched by the chef some time ago. Because the materials are hard to come by, I only made a few bowls today, and Xiao Shi's bowl is the last one. It's a pity for Xiao Xiang, but fortunately, he no longer asks to bring another bowl back to Xiaobao." The shopkeeper took 2 steps back, and then exited respectfully, but he didn't know that his behavior had always fallen into the eyes of the people in the box opposite on the 2nd floor. Mrs. Shu watched the shopkeeper exit the box, turned her gaze back, and asked, "Have you found out everything?" "Yes, the buddies in the building should have been instructed not to say anything no matter how the servants asked, but the customers who were beside the shopkeeper at that time heard clearly that when the old lady said the registration number, she was talking about Rongjun Wangfu, and said Princess Rongjun is not far away in the silk and satin village." Mrs. Shu lowered her eyes and said nothing. Shu Shiniang said anxiously, "Mother, what are we going to do to provoke that evil star Mu Yangling? She is favored by the king of Rongjun and acts domineeringly. She has torn her face before. We should avoid it." "She is." That was in the past. Mrs. Shu put down her teacup, and said, "If Wanyang hadn't come, I wouldn't have provoked that indifferent thing, but haven't you heard that Wanyang is here too? No matter what, Wanyang is a daughter who crawled out of my stomach. Don't you understand her temperament?" Shu Shiniang hesitated. Her father-in-law is still the second-rank minister in the imperial court. She really doesn't need to take the risk of offending Mu Yangling, but as her mother said, Wanyang is here. With Wanyang's temperament, she will not deny it. Them. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 738. Shu Shiniang and Shu Fourth Grandma helped Mrs. Shu in from left to right. Someone was picking fabrics in the lobby of the silk and satin village. Mrs. Shu and Shu Shiniang looked around the room, but they didn't see the person they were looking for. That's right, Mu Yangling is the princess of Rongjun, so he will naturally be invited to the inner room, maybe even to the backyard. How could he stay in the lobby? Mrs. Shu pondered for a moment and then looked at Shu Shiniang. Although Shu Shiniang was a little reluctant, she still said to the female assistant who came to entertain her, "I just saw a blue-covered but unusually wide carriage outside. I don't know whose family it is. Now Beijing can afford it? Why do people with large carriages still have blue cloth covers?" The female assistant was taken aback for a moment, and then smiled and said, "Mrs. Zhang Er has good eyesight, that carriage is indeed not from an ordinary family." The female assistant thought for a while. The master of the Zhang family is in the 2nd rank, this lady should also know the princess of Rongjun. Yes, so he said with a smile, "That is the carriage of Rongjun prince's mansion. Although it is covered with green cloth, we don't know what's going on inside. Such a family should be low-key and luxurious." Shu Shiniang smiled slightly, nodded and said, "The emperor is thrifty, the king of Rongjun is the emperor's most beloved younger brother, and there is something to respond to the holy will. I didn't expect the princess of Rongjun to be here. I haven't seen her for a few days. Please greet her well." The female clerk was not surprised and said, "The second wife will choose the fabric first, and I will ask in a while. If Princess Rongjun is free, I will take you there." Shu Shiniang smiled and nodded. After entering the box, the female assistant left. Mrs. Shu turned her head and glanced at the old nanny behind her. The old nanny hurriedly followed her out, and came back not long after, saying, "She went to the backyard. Wrong, the people from the county palace should be in the backyard." As soon as the words fell, the female waiter came in with a few people holding fabrics behind her, and she said with a smile, This is the newly arrived fabric from our silk and satin shop. The old lady and the two wives have a look. If you like it, I'll wrap it up for you. Xu Shiniang nodded, waved her hand and said, we can just look at these for ourselves, you go entertain others first, we will give you the list after we have chosen. The female assistants don't like people looking at the store when they know that someone is choosing something, and they like to discuss by themselves. As one of the largest silk and satin shops in Beijing, they naturally satisfy the needs of customers to the greatest extent, so the female assistants not only retreated by themselves, even the people behind were taken away, leaving only a little girl with only her head left outside to wait for orders. If there were orders from inside, the little girl would be able to quickly notify them. The female buddies and the others had only left for less than half a quarter of an hour when the door of the box opened, and an old woman gave her a piece of silver with a smile, and said with a smile, our old lady wants to drink by how silver needles, so I invite your aunt to make a pot come. The little girl was startled, and quickly took the money to salute and leave, but she was slandering in her heart, as expected of a noble family, this pico silver needle can drink a whole pot, and others only order 1 cup at a time. As soon as the little girl left, the door of the box was completely opened, 4th Grandma Shu stayed behind to deal with it, and Xu Shiniang helped Mrs. Shu to the backyard. Although 4th Grandma Shu also wanted to meet the aunt she had never met, but under the eyes of Mrs. Shu, she still stayed behind. The door of the backyard is ajar. In ancient times, both the rules and the law and order were much better than modern times. The most important thing is that you have to go up to the 2nd floor and then down a staircase to enter the backyard. It has always been guarded only from the 1st floor to the 2nd floor. People who can go to the 2nd floor are either rich or expensive. Who would have thought that someone would have the audacity to barge into the backyard without an invitation? Since the opening of the silk and satin village, the most outrageous behavior of customers is to stay on the 2nd floor and want to meet the distinguished guests who come out of the backyard, but there is another door in the backyard, so it is really difficult to block the distinguished guests here, but today, the Silk and Satin Village, an event that can be recorded in the Silk and Satin Zhuang's history, happened. Someone actually broke into the backyard, and both of them came from aristocratic families. The female shopkeeper of the Silk and Satin Village looked at Mrs. Shu and Xu Shiniang, who suddenly appeared with an ugly expression. After a few changes, she saw the ugly expression of Princess Rongjun and hurriedly knelt on the ground to plead guilty. Mu Yangling looked at the trembling female shopkeeper, slowly put away the anger on his face, and said, "Get up, it's not all your fault, some people insist on breaking in, you just set up thousands of dangers, you can also move forward with a cheeky face." Xu Shiniang panicked with embarrassment on her face, and lowered her head slightly. Mrs. Shu glanced at Mu Yangling, angry in her heart, and looked at Xu Wanyang, who was sitting on the side with her head lowered. This was different from what she expected. After glancing at her at first, he lowered his head, not knowing what he was thinking. But she didn't miss the shock and disbelief of that look. Mrs. Shu sighed faintly, looked at Xu Wanyang's eyes gradually softened, and sighed, "Have you been doing well these years?" Xu Wanyang's tears flowed out with a wow, she bit her handkerchief and buried her head in tears. Distress flashed in Mu Yangling's eyes, and he hurriedly stepped forward to hug his mother's back, and softly called, "Mother." Xiao Xia was a little at a loss, and looked at Nanny Xia. Nanny Xia glanced at Xu Shiniang, whose face was 3 points similar to Xu Wanyang, knowing that they must have violated some privacy, so she nodded slightly. Mrs. Xia got up gently, and went out with the support of Nanny Xia. The shopkeeper knelt on the ground and was sweating profusely. She thought that Xu Shiniang and Mrs. Shu had barged into curry favor with the Rongjun Palace. In this way, there is clearly a hidden secret in it. As the second happiest and noblest woman in Daki, Mu Yangling's life experience and identity have long been revealed. Even she knew that Mu came from Orion's family, her father was Orion, even she herself was Orion, but luckily, She rescued King Rong and Mr. Fan by chance when she was a child, and later the two families often moved around, and Mu Shi became a military household. After being promoted, she has changed from a lowly soldier to a second-rank general, and the Mu family has even changed from a peasant girl to a princess of Rongjun. But Mu's mother, they really didn't pay attention. Before, she only thought that this lady was so temperamental, gentle as water, and she was not inferior to her daughter who was as beautiful as peach blossoms. Now it seems that the hidden feelings in it are not ordinary big. Although she was curious, she really didn't want to know at all. Who knew if she would die if she found out? She almost summoned up the most courage, and looked at Xiao Xia who had already got up as if she was asking for help. Xiao Xia's footsteps stopped, her heart softened, and she waved at her. The female shopkeeper heaved a sigh of relief, got up gently, and went out quietly behind Nanny Xia. Before closing the door, a sigh came from inside the door. Our mother and daughter haven't seen each other for more than 20 years. The female shopkeeper shook her hand and closed all the doors, but the voice inside still came out vaguely. Xu Wanyang cried hard, looked up at her mother, saw her smiling at her. She got up and knelt down gently in front of her. Mother, Mu Yangling's face was a little ugly, but Xu Sheniang and Mrs. Xu both breathed a sigh of relief in their hearts. Xu Wanyang looked up at her mother, and said in a hoarse voice, "Mother, I never thought my daughter would see you alive." "Good boy." Mrs. Xu stroked her head. Xu Wanyang looked at her with tears in her eyes, and shook her head slightly. "Daughter is not good, mother. My daughter has always known that she is not smart enough, so she can't figure out some things. My daughter has thought about many scenes of meeting you again, and I want to see you again. What should I say when I see you? My daughter has thought a lot, but seeing you today, my daughter just wants to ask her mother a word." Xu Wanyang stared straight into Mrs. Xu's eyes and asked, "Why do you and your father talk to each other? We are registered as a military household. Don't you know that the Lord will die in battle? Once he dies, we orphans and widows will have no way to survive. The reborn wife is farming." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 739. Mrs. Xu and Xu Sheniang froze. The tears in Mrs. Xu's eyes disappeared little by little, and the hand that was placed on Xu Wanyang was also taken off, but there was still a smile on her face, and she said softly, "Mrs., if you don't trust others, could it be possible that you still don't trust your mother? This is probably caused by someone who caused us to drive a wedge between our mother and daughter." Xu Wanyang shook her head slightly, looked up at her with tears in her eyes. "Mother, my daughter has grown up. She is no longer a 15-year-old girl who doesn't know anything. 10 years ago, the Mu family was nothing, just as a hunter, not to mention the capital city, but Xingzhou Prefecture. There are not many people who know us, but the number of husbands is set in the capital city. The emperor will not lie to us." Old Mrs. Xu's body was stiff, and the smile on her face slowly disappeared. She looked down at her daughter who was crying but couldn't hide her tenderness, and asked, "So, you don't intend to recognize me as a mother?" Xu Wanyang was in great pain. So did her mother admit it? Although she was skeptical, she still had a fluke mentality, so she lied to her, but she didn't expect that her mother would really stop refuting. Xu Wanyang fell limply on the ground, and Mu Yangling hurriedly stepped forward to hug her. Mrs. Xu only thought she was thinking about it and changed her mind, so she sighed and said, "Wanyang, mother knows that you are wronged, but your father didn't do it back then. After discussing, I will do this. When I know, it will be too late. You also know that once a military household is naturalized, it will be very difficult to get out of it unless you accumulate enough military merit. Your father has regretted it all these years. Blame him for being so good-faced back then." Mu Yangling snorted coldly in his heart. Maybe he regretted letting them enroll in the military back then, but instead let them take off, so they were caught. Mrs. Xu just thought she couldn't see Mu Yangling's cold face. What Sheniang said was right, This child looked nothing like Wanyang except for his eyebrows and eyes. Sure enough, his daughter, Father Xiao, was born in Orion, and was very vulgar. Mrs. Shu sneered in her heart, but she looked at Shu Wanyang tenderly on her face, wanting to hold her hand. Now your father regrets so much that he dare not come to see you, but he is so old, how can I bear him, this suffering? I can only come to you in person. Good boy, just say, are you still willing to recognize our parents? Shu Wanyang turned her head and glanced at her daughter. Seeing her looking at her with worried eyes, she was startled, and a faint light flashed in her eyes. She turned her head to look at her mother, and smiled wryly. Mother, the daughter was born by you and my father. Admittedly, you and my father are also my parents. Shu Wanyang's meaning is very clear. She has no right to choose whether to recognize her parents, only parents can choose whether to recognize her daughter, and this is exactly the reality of this world. As a daughter, she really does not have such a right to choose. Mother, Mu Yangling couldn't help stomping. The corners of Mrs. Shu's mouth were slightly raised, revealing a real smile. Shu Wanyang wiped her tears with a handkerchief, and said with a wry smile, daughter really didn't expect to be recognized back to the Shu family in her lifetime, and to be able to return to the genealogy of the Shu family. Even if she died immediately, she would be willing. Mrs. Shu was stunned, her mouth opened, but she couldn't say a word when she met Shu Wanyang's starry eyes. Shu Wanyang continued, this time, I was also honored by the canonization of the eldest prince. There are people from various families, and I will invite them to see the ceremony at that time, so that I can explain where my daughter has been these years, so as not to be randomly guessed. It messed up the reputation of our Shu family. Mrs. Shu and Mrs. Shu are bitter, inviting someone here will ruin the reputation of the Shu family, okay. But thinking of the identities of Mu Yangling and Mu Shi, the brains of the two began to work rapidly. In fact, as long as some things in the past were concealed, Shu Wanyang's experience was not only legendary, but it worked well, and was praised as a kind person. People always make a family. Mu Shi has only Shu Wanyang up to now, and I heard that there is not even a room in the house. Mrs. Shu and Shu Shinyang's thoughts turned, and the plan in their minds became clearer and clearer. Just as they were about to follow the trend, they saw Shu Wanyang holding Mu Yangling's hand tightly, crying and laughing, go and talk to your father, say, let him divorce me. Mu Yangling's eyes widened. Can her mother live without her father? Mother, what are you doing? Shu Wanyang said with tears, although your father has never said anything, I know in my heart that he is complaining about the Shu family. Both of you father and daughter have the same tough temper. I come from the Shu family, and it is only natural that I return to the Shu family. But you are members of the Mu family. The Shu family has harmed you, how can I force you to recognize the Shu family? Your father let the Shu family go for my sake, and did not care about those things back then. Mother is already grateful, how can you ask for more? Mu Yangling's eyebrows twitched, and she suddenly settled down. She was not sure about anything else, but she dared to guarantee with her life that her mother would never leave her father. Tell her, take good care of your younger brothers and sisters. If they make trouble later, send them to Zhuangzi, so that they can be polished and polished. After speaking, he turned his head and smiled at Mrs. Shu, Mother, let's go. At this time, Shu Wanyang still had tears on her face, and her smile was extremely bitter. I don't know, I thought why the Shu family forced her. Mrs. Shu was so angry that she was not sure if it was her daughter's heartfelt intentions or if she did it on purpose. She could understand going back to Shu's house with her, but if she was abandoned by Mu's house, would she still have a way out? Moreover, if Shu Wanyang was abandoned by the Mu family because of the Shu family, wouldn't Mu Shi and Mu Yangling Mu Boan hate the Shu family even more? Mu Yangling is the princess of Rongjun, Mu Shi is a second-rank general, and in the fourth room of the Shu family, her husband has not been employed since the fall of the previous dynasty, and her son is only a small official in 6 departments. How can the Mu family be the opponent? Even if there are many people in the family who are officials in the court, will they offend Rongjun Palace and Mu Shi because of their 4 families? Xu Huanyang can't recognize Shu's family. Shu's breath was stuck in her chest, she couldn't swallow it, and she couldn't let it out, which made her chest ache. All the things she said to Xu Huanyang before became a joke, and she even slapped herself in the face. Shu looked at Xu Huanyang suspiciously. Did she really mean it? But she knew how stupid this daughter was back then. They went to the flower fair together, so all the little girls knew that they were there to make connections. Said to make clothes for her. Does she have no clothes as a housewife? She needs a rich young lady to do it for her. Even if she has to be filial, it depends on the time. If she said this when she was parting from the wives, it would still win her the reputation of being pure and filial. The family came to her room secretly to tell her. Even her real sister didn't dare to tell, such a cowardly idiot actually learned to bite. Shu's fierce eyes swept towards Xu Huanyang. Mu Yangling felt her mother's body tremble, and was angry in his heart, so he strode in front of her, faced Shu, and sneered, "Recognize me. Mother. My mother has no right to object, but that doesn't mean our Mu family doesn't have one. If you want to recognize my mother, that's fine. Tomorrow, I'll go to the palace and beg the empress, how about letting her make a decree?" Not only Xu Xinyang, but also Shu's heart trembled, subconsciously avoiding Mu Yangling's gaze, her face turned pale. They have been avoiding the queen. The reborn wife is farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 740. The emperor and queen have been reunited for nearly 2 years, and she is the only one in the harem, but she has not been pregnant so far. The Zhou family has already moved out of the capital, and they dare not even contact the Shu family. I am afraid that the queen will settle the account one day. If Mu Yangling brought the matter of the Shu family to the queen at this time, wouldn't he have put the handle of the Shu family on the queen's hands? Shu didn't think the other party would miss this opportunity. Her and Xu Xinyang's expressions changed, and they looked at Mu Yangling with a livid look. Mu Yangling snorted coldly, and said, "My mother is kind and cowardly. I, Mu Yangling, am not a vegetarian. If anyone forces me and my 3 younger brothers and sisters to lose their mother, I will fight them to death. If you don't believe me, just give it a try." Of course Shu didn't dare to try. But Xu Huanyang patted her lightly, and said angrily, "Aling, how can you talk to Shu like this? Even if your father doesn't recognize her, she is much older than you. Mother, the Shu family has a feud with the Qi family. It was thanks to them that the eldest prince gave birth prematurely. I am polite enough to say this. You should know who the Shu family is better than your daughter. Now I only ask Shu in a word, do you want to recognize my mother?" Mu Yangling stared at her closely and said, "If you do, I will enter the palace immediately." Xu Huanyang also raised her head to look at her mother. Seeing her livid face and not saying a word, she understood her choice in her heart. In fact, she had expected it a long time ago. Xu Huanyang was not sad, but had a feeling of it really is. Seeing that her always cowardly daughter dared to look at her like this, Shu was furious, but she couldn't say anything under Mu Yangling's eyes, and her chest felt uncomfortable due to the suffocation of anger. Shu waved her sleeves and turned around to leave. Xu Xinyang looked up at Xu Huanyang, and said with tears in her eyes, "Sister, you hurt mother so much." Xu Huanyang looked at her sister and said in a low voice, "I broke my mother's heart? What about my heart?" Xu Xinyang gritted her teeth, turned around and caught up with Shu. Kajia and Bosi asked the female clerk in the store for a lot of rags, and also found out the price of the purse. It is said to be rags, but it is not small, the smallest piece is the size of a palm, and the purse is not as expensive as I imagined, the worst one is 18 coins, Why is it the worst? Because the best craftsmanship can only embroider the worst. But the two of them are still very happy, at least they have a direction, don't they? So the two happily ran to the backyard with two small bundles, and bumped into Mrshu head-on. Kageo fell backwards and sat on the ground. Mrshu was also knocked backwards. Fortunately, Shu Shinyang rushed over to hug her, but Mrshu was a bit fat, she couldn't hold her, and the two fell together. Full of anger, Mrshu rushed towards Kageo. Without seeing the person clearly, she cursed, "Presumptuous, you are so reckless and rude at such a young age, how did your parents teach you?" But Geo wanted to apologize, but she got angry when she heard the words, and was about to scold back, remembering what her sister taught her 2 days ago. It was her fault no matter what, so she gritted her teeth and apologized, said, "Old lady, I accidentally bumped into you just now, I'm sorry, but my parents are very good, you are not allowed to scold them." Mrshu was helped up by Shu Shinyang. She sneered when she heard the words. She raised her head and was about to teach her a lesson, when she saw Kijia's face. Her pupils couldn't help shrinking. If Mu Yangling only looked like Shu Wanyang, then the little girl in front of her was simply Shu Wanyang, a replica of her childhood. Without her telling, Mrshu knew the identity of the other party. Just now, the anger of Shu Wanyang and Mu Yang's aura instantly had something to vent to. She sneered, "So it's them, no wonder they are so uneducated." This remark not only made Kageo angry, but also Bosi, but Bosi was more careful than Kageo. He looked up at the two of them, and his eyes stopped on Shu Shinyang. This person was somewhat similar to his mother. In the middle of hearing the news from the mouth of the female buddy, I suddenly had a guess in my heart. The female buddy clearly said that this backyard only entertains one distinguished guest at a time, and now his mother and sister are inside. How could these two people come out of the backyard? He still looked angry. Before coming, not only the eldest brother, but also the father specially asked them to go, telling them not to cause trouble in the capital, so as not to be caught by the Shu family. They all knew that their mother was from the Shu family. Although their father didn't tell them what happened back then, they only said that their mother and the Shu family had a bad relationship, but they were not fools, and there was their elder brother. The father didn't want them children to despise the mother, so he didn't want to speak ill of the mother's natal family, but the elder brother didn't feel any pressure. The eldest brother said that the mother was almost killed by the so-called grandfather and grandmother. It was the father who rescued the beauty heroically. But the grandfather's family was really too much, and it was fine not to help them when they were in trouble, but even worse, they enrolled their father in the military, which was a death feud. Not only Bosi, but also Kageo, had discussed no less than 20 ways to get revenge before they came. They had forgotten about it when they were detained by their sister, but they didn't expect the other party to come to their door. Bosi tilted his head, and asked again for confirmation, "Are you Mrshu, the fourth bedroom of Jingzayashu's family?" Mrshu sneered, "Sure enough, she is uneducated. Not only did she not bark when she saw your grandmother, but she even called your grandparents' house." Bosi confirmed it, and took a look at Kageo, and Kageo also realized instantly that he had seen his enemy. The child's way of revenge was very straightforward, and the two of them had never been angry before, so naturally they didn't have much scheming. They confirmed each other's identity, and immediately acted with confidence. Bosi rushed out first, knocked the two of them to the ground with his head, and then pulled out the ornaments on their heads and threw them into the pool next to them. The two screamed, and Mrshu cursed, "Bastard, you know who I am? I am your grandmother." Bosi said, "My grandparents' family is dead long ago, where did my grandmother come from? You thief not only steals but also cheats." Kageo also sat on the ground and screamed, "Come on, catch the thief, my lord, help me." Before anyone arrived, she ran up to Shu Shinyang and kept grabbing her hair, making sure that no one would recognize her immediately. Two 10-year-old children are said to be unable to hold down two adults, but the two have been strong since they were young, and they have been riding horses and practicing martial arts. It is more than enough to hold down two adults. The old lady and Xu Sheniang had disheveled hair, and their noses and faces were so swollen that they couldn't be recognized. Mu Yangling and Xu Wanyang also rushed over. When they saw such a scene, they were so angry that they almost went to heaven. Xu Wanyang pointed at the two children and almost fainted with anger. They cursed at the same time, "Even if you are a thief, it is not your turn to catch them. If you shout, there are people who are at your service. What do you look like now? You are like shrews. Also, learn all the kung fu that your father asked you to learn into the dog's belly." You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 741. Mu Yangling pulled the two children up and pushed them aside. He looked at Mrs. Xu and Xu Sheniang with cold eyes, and before they could speak, he turned to Guyu and said, "Shut people up in the backyard first, and send them back to you go to the yamen." Guyu brought two wives forward, immediately gagged their mouths and slammed them down. Mrs. Xu gave two woo-woo and looked at Mu Yangling and Xu Wanyang resentfully. Xu Wanyang's face was pale, she stepped forward and grabbed Mu Yangling fiercely, her mouth was slightly opened, she looked at the two children with their heads down, but she still didn't say anything. The people who came to watch were cold, and greeted Mu Yangling one after another. Although they didn't see the person who was taken away, they were able to come to the backyard through the second floor. They should not be thieves and commoners. That's it? The female shopkeeper also rushed over. She pleaded guilty to Mu Yangling first, and then said that the matter must be investigated strictly and she would give Mu Yangling an explanation. She was worried because she was afraid that Mu Yangling would blame Silk and Satin Village for this matter. Mu Yangling nodded slightly, did not pursue too much, simply said a few words to everyone, and then led them to the backyard. Mu Yangling looked at the embarrassed Mrs. Xu and Xu Sheniang, took a deep breath, glared at Bosi and Kijia before ordering people to tidy up Mrs. Xu and Xu Sheniang. Mu Yangling held the teacup and sat in the hall. Without saying a word, Guyu came in softly, and said in a low voice, "Madam, Mrs. Xu and Mrs. Zhang have already cleaned up, it's just the wounds on their faces." Mu Yangling put down the tea cover and said, "Where are the rest of the Xu family?" "The fourth grandma of the Xu family is waiting in the box on the second floor. Bring her and let her pick up Mrs. Xu and Xu Sheniang." Xu Fang heard the commotion in the backyard, and originally wanted to come over to see the situation, but their box was a bit far away, and when they arrived, Mu Yangling and the others had already left, and only the onlookers were left guessing in low voices. "It doesn't matter who the person is, the clothes on his body don't look like ordinary people." After inquiring, Xu Fang found out that the younger brother and sister of Princess Rong Jun caught two female thieves in the backyard, beat them up, and now they were dragged to the backyard by the people of Rong Jun Palace. Xu Fang's heart trembled when he heard it, and he almost immediately decided that it was her mother-in-law and eldest aunt. She went back to the box with a pale complexion, and the female shopkeeper came over just after she sat down, and invited her out. The female shopkeeper didn't have a good look at Xu Fang's. She wanted to curry favor with the higher-ranking people in their silk and satin village, but she kept her sense of proportion, neither annoyed the nobles nor dragged the silk and satin village into trouble, but like the Xu family, it was the first time I saw such a cheeky person who broke into the backyard directly, and she heard something she shouldn't have heard. This Xu family is really harmful. So the female shopkeeper didn't have much good looks towards Xu Fangji, and after taking her out, she went around to another door in the backyard. The female shopkeeper stopped and said, "Fourth Grandma Xu, you'd better ask someone to drive your carriage to the yard." Xu Fang didn't dare to ask any more questions, so he hurriedly ordered their carriage to be driven in. After they were cleared away, Mrs. Shu and Shu Shu Niang were helped out by two women, their faces gloomy. Shu Fang was shocked when he saw their bruised nose and swollen face. He trotted forward to support Madame Shu, mother. Mrs. Shu glared at her gloomily, looked at the female shopkeeper, and said with a sneer, "Princess Rongjun is planning to send us away directly. It's a good plan, and it will be fine if we leave this door in the future." The female shopkeeper said indifferently, "If Mrs. Shu is not convinced, you can go to the Rongjun palace to talk to the princess, but my shop is small, so I won't keep you. As for how you appeared in the backyard from the box on the second floor, I don't know, don't pursue it anymore, you can go." Mrs. Shu's face turned pale immediately, she snorted coldly, waved away the mother-in-law who was supporting her, and got into the carriage with the help of Mrs. Shu Fang. Shu Shu's face was also very gloomy. Before getting into the carriage, she looked back. Shu Wanyang, who was spinning behind her buttocks, did not appear from the beginning to the end. Unexpectedly, in the end, it was she who rode on her head. She was obviously more beautiful, more capable, and more talented than her. Unexpectedly, her husband and daughter were far superior to her in the end. Shu Shinyang's heart twisted for a while, she clenched her fists tightly, and her eyes flashed with evil. She slowly climbed into the carriage and sat beside her mother. The Mu family is powerful, and the Shu family is not a vegetarian. Although her younger brother has a small official position, there are many Shu family officials in the court, and it is a family. If someone beats them in the face, even if the family hates them, they will definitely stand up for them. Who said saving face is not a good thing? But Mu Yangling was comforting Shu Wanyang, saying, "Mother, the Shu family has long since fallen, don't worry, there are father and Heiran here, they don't dare to force it, now it's Mrs. Shu and Shu Shinyang who are coming forward, if it's a man, I'll beat you up." Go. Mu Yangling had already made up her mind, and went back to talk to the head of the Shu family and her so-called grandfather, lest the Shu family would always be entangled with them, which would be too annoying. Shu Wanyang glared at her, and said, "Your brother and sister all learned from you." She turned out to be like a shrew and got into a fight with others. Even if she didn't intend to recognize the Shu family, Mrs. Shu was their grandmother after all. No matter how angry you are, you can't beat someone. Mu Yangling called Shu, "I've been away from home for 5 years, how can I teach them? That's what I learned from your father. The three of you have the same temper as your father. What can't you say properly? If you do it in public, no matter how much you take advantage of it, you don't take it anymore now. What mother said is that we really need to teach our younger brothers and sisters well, they are too stupid. Even if you want to fight, you should have skills. How can you roll with others and beat them? You must know that this is the most vulnerable way of playing, and many methods cannot be used under the watchful eyes of the public. The most important thing is that although beating people is cool, in the capital, you must learn how to slap people in the face without hitting people." Mu Yangling felt that her younger siblings were all spoiled, and they would beat up with fists when they encountered problems. Fortunately, it was the Shu family who hit them this time. If it was someone else's family, she would definitely have to take her mother to make amends. Regarding this, the two children said very confidently, "We beat them because they belong to the Shu family. If they belong to someone else, we will definitely apologize. Even if they scold us, we can bear it at the worst, and just find an opportunity to scold them back later." When Shu Wanyang heard that they said they were going to attack Shu's family, her complexion suddenly turned dark. The two children couldn't look at each other. Bosi clenched his fist and said angrily, "It's fine for them to bully mother before, but we were not there at that time, but now we are all there, they dare to bully you at the door, don't beat them up. Is she worthy of her parents' upbringing?" Kajia nodded again and again, patted her chest and said to her mother, "Mother, don't be afraid, I'll ask someone to find out if there are any children in the Shu family going out." As long as they dare to go out, my second brother and I will beat them up until they come out. Don't dare to come to us again. Xu Huanyang clutched her chest and said, Aling, lock them up for me, why did I have these two evils? The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 742. Bosi and Kijia were not convinced at all this time, and they did nothing wrong. Could it be that they still watched outsiders bullying their mother? But facing the furious mother, the two dared not refute, and could only stand aside with their heads bowed in aggrieved. Mu Yangling was not in a good mood to choose fabrics anymore, so he asked people to find Xiao Xia who had escaped, and they packed up and went back. Kajia gave her brother a slap, and gestured silently, jewelry in the pool. Bosi glanced at the people coming and going, and then quietly moved outside, but Kajia held him, and with a rare wit, he shouted at Mu Yangling, Sister, let's go pick up the little bear. Mu Yangling looked up at the two of them fixedly, nodded slightly, and the two of them rushed out hand in hand, and they were grounded when they went back. If the elder brother knew what they did, he would definitely punish them for copying books again. In just a few days, they have already understood the truth that it is difficult to move without money, and they must have no time to make money after being grounded for copying books. The two rushed to the pool, searched carefully, and found that all the jewelry they threw into the water were gone. The two children stood by the pool in shock as if they had been struck by lightning. Who moved their trophies? Of course it was Mu Yangling. Mu Yangling asked someone to fish up the things and put them in the Shu family's carriage intact, trying not to leave any evidence. Bosi and Kijia were heartbroken, but Xiao Xiang in Yupin building wiped his mouth contentedly, held his belly and said, It's full. The shopkeeper was also very happy, and slightly bent over, he asked, Do you want to pack something back to honor the princess? Little Bear blinked, Can you still pack? The shopkeeper smiled even wider and nodded repeatedly. Little Xiang took out the piece of silver his mother gave him from his pocket, handed it to the shopkeeper, and asked, Is it enough? The shopkeeper really wanted to say that this meal was treated by their restaurant and that no money was charged, but when he saw the expression of the old nun behind Xiaoshizi, he immediately changed his tune and said with a smile, Enough, enough, there is still more. Little Xiang breathed a sigh of relief, waved his hand and said, I bought them all. So, Little Bear came back with big and small bags. Fortunately, he didn't have to carry the things. He just had to walk in front with his stomach full, and the old mother and servants behind him would carry them. For their safety, the shopkeeper of the restaurant even called the two buddies came with them, for fear that someone who had no eyes would bump into the eldest son. The two guys were empty-handed, and they wanted to carry things for them so that the boy or the old mother could hold Xiao Shizi, but little Xiang refused to let him. He knew very well that he couldn't ask people to work for nothing. The money is gone, what if the two guys are asked to pick up things and he can't afford the money? So let the old lady and the boy carry it. As for his walking problem, this is simpler. Walking to digest food when he is full is just right. When the little bear saw his mother, he jumped over happily, Mother, I brought you back something delicious. Mu Yangling was still thinking about the Shu family at this time, so he just nodded slightly, touched his head and praised, Xiang is so filial, and knows how to think about his mother, is there any for grandma? Little Bear nodded fiercely, yes, there are also those for daddy, for uncle, and aunt. Mu Yangling asked him to bring some delicious food to his grandmother, and asked him to give the two guys a reward and send them away. The people from the Rongjun prince's mansion soon left for the mansion. The female shopkeeper sent them out of the backyard anxiously. She was very worried, she wanted to please the Rongjun prince's mansion, but unexpectedly such an accident happened. At this time, the Shu family also fell out. Shu Qing is over 60 years old, and he is considered the oldest member of the Shu family. In addition, he has handed over the affairs of the fourth bedroom to his son Shu Mingxiang a few years ago. He usually meets friends and reads books, which can make him angry. There are very few things. 5 years ago, the Empress gave birth prematurely, and the Shu family was forced to compensate for one thing, but now, there is another one. Compared to that time, Shu Qing was even more angry this time. He didn't expect his daughter to threaten him. Looking at the old wife and daughter with bruised nose and swollen face, Shu Qing was furious, and said, "Get me a car, I'm going to Rongjun Palace to ask Shu Wanyang, who gave her this life." Shu Fang looked anxiously at her husband. Shu Mingxiang hurriedly knelt down to stop his father. "Father, the second sister died 21 years ago." Shu Qing's face turned blue, his eyes gleamed coldly, he was choked so hard that he couldn't speak. "That's right, Shu Wanyang of the Shu family died 21 years ago, do you want to pull out what happened back then? What good does that do for the Shu family? Not only lost face and reputation, but also completely torn face with the Mu family and the Rongjun Palace, but they didn't get any benefit. Although the Mu family and Rongjun Palace are equally hostile to them, at least they are just strangers to each other. Even if they want to deal with them, they will only act twice in private to let people know the grievances of the three families. At that time, there is no need for Mu Shi and Mu Yangling to instigate, most of the people who please them step on the Shu family. The Shu family has a solid background, but Sifang's strength lies there. His father has only one son like himself, and he also has only one son. He is weak and can't compete with the Mu family, so it's better to avoid his edge at this time. My second sister knows that even if she gets angry for a while, she will never kill her natal family. As long as they don't mess with them, they won't hold on to it if they think about it. They just want to let mother. I felt a little wronged with my eldest sister." At this moment, Shu Mingxiang also blamed Shu Wanyang, knowing that his mother was getting old, he still stimulated her like this, and let a pair of 10-year-old children beat up his mother, which is simply unreasonable. Shu Mingxiang gritted his teeth with hatred in his heart, but apologized in shame on his face. "Father, I'm all to blame for this matter. If I hadn't proposed to enlist them in the military, the Shu family and the Mu family would not have feuded." With the temperament of the second sister, it is easy to recognize her in private. Shu Mingxiang had already learned about Shu Wanyang's heart not from Shu Shiniang, and regretted it for a while. Who would have thought that the still-standing Das who would perish, and who would have thought that the Mu family, who were starved of food in the past, would marry the royal family and prosper? It turned out that when Shu Mingxiang had just passed the examination, when he was about to make further progress, he ran into Jingqiuachao, and the Xingzhou mansion was in chaos. Shu Qing had always been a cautious person. When he left the Xingzhou mansion, he felt that the living Shu Wanyang was however, the situation was critical at the time, and Mu Shi took Shu Wanyang away and hid in the deep mountains. He could not have left his men to chase and kill the two of them. Shu Wanyang, it is not certain whether they will be able to reach Linen Mansion. Ji Yanmushi is good at kung fu and has great strength. To kill him, at least 8 guards must be left behind. This is a large number for Shu Qing, who has lost his troops, and it is not safe. Therefore, he only left one. The more clever boy asked him to settle in Xingzhou mansion, trying to find out Mu Shi's identity, and kept an eye on him for the time being.